Hello, all of you. On behalf of Climb, I welcome you on this presentation on shares and debentures. Now, before I begin, there is a small disclaimer. In this presentation, we are going to talk about the difference between shares and debentures, but this presentation is aimed at giving you very elementary knowledge of the two terms. We have made this presentation especially for those students who have just begun studying commerce, and we have presumed that such students have no understanding of lot of commercial terms which are regularly used, and it is made only with the purpose to satisfy their basic curiosity about these two terms when they start studying commerce. These two terms are very commonly used in commercial language, and sometimes students may find it difficult to understand if these two terms come in the very first few chapters of accountancy or business studies. But so far they have not studied these terms. So this presentation is only a very basic knowledge about it, and we would like to also say that please do not use this presentation for any specialized knowledge and a deeper knowledge of shares and debentures. Let us now start with the difference between shares and debentures. When we see around in our society and market, we basically find three forms of businesses. And for a customer, sometimes we may not know which form of business it is. When we go to a shop, we are only seeing the shopkeeper, the salesman out there, we are buying the product, we don't know what form of business is there. But all these businesses primarily can be categorized into three categories, three major categories. There are many more, but then there are three major categories. The most common form of business is a sole trade business. Now, what is a sole trade business? This is the most common form of business which you can see around. These are in the form of small kirana shops, or we may say grocery stores, stationery shops, optical shops, and sweet shops, where mobile shops or mobile repairing shops. There can be offices, they can be factories. So these are not very big business organizations, but the unique part of these businesses is that they are run by one person, or that one person might be supported by his or her family members. Younger brother, sister, spouse could be helping in the business. In this kind of businesses, only one person invests the money, and that person alone bears the risk. That person takes the profit. Losses are also borne by that person alone. Now, then there are other form of business. The other form is a partnership form of business organization. In a partnership firm, there are at least two owners. There are at least two people who invest their money. In India, the maximum number of partners can be 50 as of now. But then from 2 to 50, it could be any number of partners in a partnership firm. These all people, most of them, or almost all in many cases, invest capital. They all are involved in decision making. They all take part in the business affairs, and then they all share profits and losses. In a partnership firm, it is basically a group of owners who run the business as a team. And the third form of business organization is a company which is technically called as a joint stock company. Now, what is this joint stock company? And these joint stock companies are those organizations which are large or big organizations. they involve lot of investment. The risk in these businesses is very high, and then the people who invest money in such businesses is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 20, but they can be unlimited people. The profits of these organizations are shared between all those investors. Before we proceed, we will also like to just see, why do we need such different forms of organizations? Why we cannot just have one, say sole trade or partnership or company? Why do we need this? Three different forms of organizations. Sole trade businesses are needed because they are easiest to start. Anyone can start a sole trade business. And then these businesses can be started with very less of formalities. As you understand that when you start a business, you need some government permission in some form or the other. You need some form of registration. But in a sole trade organization, the very less formalities are involved, and it is easiest to start. A partnership firm involves some form of formalities. It is little more formal. There are little more formalities in a partnership firm than a sole trade business. But here you have more money, you have more people to work with you hand in hand. There are more people involved in taking decisions. There are people with different skills you can join together. So a partnership firm is little bigger in its operations than a sole trade business in general. Now the third form of business organization is a company. Now what is a company? Company involves, as I told you, huge capital. And then you can think of a company wherein you need such a capital, such huge amount of capital, which is not possible for few people to provide. You might need thousands of people to arrange that amount of capital. As money investment is high, so is the risk also. So you want to share that risk with as many people as possible. The big company form of businesses are basically those businesses which are large scale, which have high risk, which are complex in nature, and then they require a lot of technical professionals to manage the business because it is very complex. When you go around, you see such companies. I have given some logos here, but there are many such companies around you. When you see, then they are being managed. Okay, now one more thing that before we proceed further, only a company can issue a shares and debentures. We are talking about shares and debentures. You need to keep in mind that only a company form of organization can issue shares and debentures. Now let us take an example that you want to start a large business and therefore you need large capital, and then you also decide that you would take it as a joint stock company. For your company, you will need two types of capital. One is permanent and one is temporary. When you are running a business, you will not be able to sell your machines as long as you are running the business. You will not be able to sell your factory building. You will not be able to sell your land. You will need some capital which would be permanently invested in the business. This form of capital is called permanent capital. But you will also need a type of capital which will be needed for few years. Say it could be 3 years, 5 years, or say even 10 years. After that period, you will like to return that money. You don't need this money indefinitely. Such type of capital is known as temporary capital. So briefly, you will be needing two form of capital. One, you will need the capital to invest permanently in the business, and the other capital you will need to invest for some shorter duration. Now the question is, from where can you get the money that you need to run the business? There are many people in the society who might have some savings, or they could have good income, or they could have some surplus funds with them, and they might be interested to give it to someone who can give them good income in return. This return can be in the form of interest, in the form of profits, and a company can therefore get its money from anyone who has it. Now this could be banks, this could be other companies, government, it could be businessmen, this could be professionals, it could be housewives. Virtually anyone who have that funds, who have their savings, can provide you the money. And in general, all these people who have the funds are called as investors. Now these fund providers are basically of two categories, and then they have two different reasons to invest the money. Why they would give the money? An investor can give the money because he or she is looking for some fixed income, and that investor may not be interested to take risk. On the other hand, there can be another type of investor who wants good income, who wants good profit, but then he or she is also ready to take risk. So basically there are two major kinds of investors. One who are ready to take more risk and in return of good profits. Then there are those who are not ready to take risk, but then they want a fixed income. The one category of investors who want regular income and are not ready to take risk, or are ready to take less risk, are called as conservative investors. And then there can be aggressive investors who want good return and are ready to take more risk. Majorly or broadly we can say that conservative investors provide you with temporary capital and aggressive investors provide you with permanent capital. Okay, now let us state that you need a huge capital for your company. And as discussed, that this capital can be divided into two categories: permanent capital and temporary capital. It is normally said, as I told you, that the permanent capital is preferably invested by those who are aggressive investors, and temporary capital is normally invested by those who are conservative in nature. They are conservative investors. It is also generally observed that the aggressive investors are the ones who invest in shares. So now we can say that the permanent capital of the business exists in the form of share capital, and the temporary capital, which is invested by the conservative investors, it is they who buy the debentures. So the conservative investors invest in debenture capital of the company. This is a general understanding. Now what are shares and debentures? First thing you should need to understand that shares and debentures are nothing but they are the proof, they are the evidence that you have given money to the company. When you buy shares, company will give you share certificate, and when you buy debentures, company will give you debenture certificate. So a shareholder gets share certificate, debenture holder gets debenture certificates. So they are the proof that you have given money to the company. So shares can be understood as a form of a document, as a form of a paper, which is a proof that you have invested in shares of the company. Debentures can be thought of as a document which is a proof that you have invested in debenture capital of the company. These days you don't find shares and debentures in form of a paper. Today we are having these documents in digital form. These shares and debentures today exist in demat form. We call them as demat form, which you will be discussing later, and then they exist in digital form. But what you need to understand, shares and debentures are just the title, just that you have invested in the company in form of permanent capital or in form of temporary capital. Now let us see a brief difference between the two. The debenture holders expect fixed return, and which is in the form of interest. And shareholders do not get fixed returns. They get share in the profit whenever the company earns the profit. Whatever the debenture holders get, it is called interest. And shares, those who have the shares, they get dividend. The debenture money which you have given in the form of temporary capital, you will get back after some time. Maybe the company tells at the time of issuing debentures when it is going to return the debenture money. Shares are part of a permanent capital. Company returns the share capital only when the business is closed. Those people who put money into debentures, or the debentures are called as loan, and the debenture holders are called as lenders. On the other hand, the shares is the actual capital of the company. It is not a loan. It is the permanent capital of the company, and the people who buy shares are called as owners of the company. Now, a brief recap of what we have just done. Shares and debentures can be issued by the company and not the sole trader or a partnership firm. Only a company can issue shares and debentures. Both shares and debentures provide funds to the company. Company, in return for these funds which it has got in the form of shares and debentures, company gives you share certificate and debenture certificate, which is a proof that you have given money to the company. Share capital is a permanent nature and debenture capital is of temporary nature. Shareholders get dividend, whereas debenture holders get interest. Shareholders are the owners of the company, debenture holders are the lenders of the company. I'm sure that this must have helped you to get a basic idea about shares and debentures. Thank you, and you are just awesome. Have a great day.